Carol, thank you very much.
Not much tennis, did you say?
Not much, no. The balls will be blowing everywhere. Tennis balls.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks, Naga. Thank you.
7:52 is the time now.
Carol,
thank you very much.
Not much tennis, did you say?
Not much, no. The balls will be blowing everywhere. Tennis balls.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks, Naga. Thank you.
7:52 is the time now. Hello, this is Breakfast with Naga, Munchetty and Charlie Stayt.
Time now is 6:31. Good morning to you. We're going to bring you all the latest news and sport with Mike in a moment.
Let's see what else is on this morning. Animal breeding programs are under increasing threat from the pandemic. But Sizzle, who's a white rhino, will be pleased to know that he's still due to meet 2 potential mates at Whipsnade Zoo today. We'll be there. See how they get on.
Zoos, they've had a particularly tough time during the pandemic. Ticket sales have plunged, food, care, vet bills, they still remain.
Now there are worries that those financial difficulties could threaten the future survival of rare species. BBC's chief environment correspondent Justin Rowlett is at Whipsnade Zoo in Bedfordshire to tell us more. Justin, very good morning to you. Now, I know that a little later on you're going to introduce us to some rhinos, I think, which are kind of a big part of this story. Tell us more about the problems the zoos are facing.
Well, zoos have this terrible financial crisis, but let's get to the rhinos first, because I'm outside the rhino enclosure. This is where Whipsnade's southern white rhinos, rare southern white rhinos, live. And who knew? Rhinos are late risers. They haven't yet got up, but today is a crucial day for them because Sizzle, Whipsnade's male rhino, will be meeting 2 new female rhinos, Jazeera and Fahari. They've been brought in as part of an international breeding program to try and protect this endangered species. Now, these breeding programs are an essential part of what British zoos do, as I have been discovering.
Hi, baby Edie.
A super rare baby okapi takes its first teetering steps at London Zoo. Her keeper, Gemma, who shot this footage, has called her Edie. These endangered relatives of the giraffe are found only in forests in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And here's a red panda with its cub born during lockdown. Just a couple of the threatened species Britain's zoos are helping protect.
More and more we are finding that these conservation breeding programs are acting as an insurance population for species facing imminent extinction in the wild. There are countless examples of species we hold in our zoos in the UK that have been reintroduced to their former ranges from zoo populations.
To ensure there's enough genetic diversity, the world's zoos share animals. But it is expensive shipping big, dangerous animals like rhinos around. And lockdown has hit zoos hard. They've endured a double whammy. No visitors, but of course they still need to feed the animals.
We've got some sweet corn, parsnip and cucumber today.
Delicious.
Yeah. It can cost as much as £1 million a month to feed all the animals at London and Whipsnade zoos. And most zoos, including London Zoo, don't get any public funding. They rely on visitors for their income. Without help, they say something has to give.
We're all about conservation and preventing animals from going extinct. So it's a really horrible place to be where we're actually worried ourselves about the reality of going extinct. You know, that is a scary place for us to be right now.
The global zoo breeding programs covers familiar animals like these, but also dozens of species that are now extinct in the wild. Zoos are now their only hope of survival. If the COVID crisis means zoos themselves face extinction, there will be no hope for these animals.
So the government recognised that zoos faced this exceptional crisis, and back in June it brought in what it called a £100 million rescue package, generous rescue package. But the BBC has discovered that just one zoo has been able to access that cash. I'm joined now by Andy Hall, who represents the British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Now, Andy, what's the problem? Why can't zoos access this money?
Well, you can imagine when we heard there's 100 million, we were delighted. But the fact is, so few zoos have been able to access it. And that's because of the way the fund is designed, means that zoos need to be 12 weeks in their reserves, 12 weeks away from bankruptcy before they can access any cash. And that's just not good enough for zoos that are making decisions months, if not years in advance about where they're going to home their animals.
So let's be clear, if you're a zoo and you think you're in trouble, you've got a huge collection of animals, you want to find good homes for it, and that you're saying that isn't easy.
Absolutely, and animal care is a top priority for our zoos and aquariums, and in normal times it takes years to make these decisions. It took one of our members nearly 2 years to move their elephant herd, and that was before a pandemic. It's going to be even harder now.
So essentially, by the time you could access this cash, you would be bankrupt, is what you're saying?
Absolutely, and that's why government need to make changes to open up this rescue package and support the whole sector across England.
So what does it mean if zoos can't get access to money and face, as you say, this terrible financial crisis? What does that mean for zoos?
Well, it's putting at risk all their essential conservation projects. You know, we're in an extinction crisis. These are really important. It's putting at risk their education, their research work, and the very survival of some zoos rests on government support now.
I mean, is the prospect of zoos in Britain going bankrupt a real prospect? Do you think that might happen?
Absolutely, and I think we're going to see the effects of the COVID and the impact it's had on zoos' financials for a long time to come, and that's why it's so important that government gets this support right and gets it right in 2021 and beyond as well.
And you're saying that breeding programmes like the programme we've come here to see today, the Southern Rhino breeding programme, could genuinely be a threat?
Yeah, and there are some species that are absolutely reliant on it as well. There are species that are completely extinct in the wild that only exist in our zoos and aquariums. You know, we need them to thrive and survive.
So what can people watching this do to help their local zoos?
Well, firstly, we need government to make those really simple changes, but the people at home, they can go and visit their zoos, they can make donations, they can support them as they face their worst winter in memory.
Andy Hall, thank you very much indeed. So listen, we will be back here at 8 o'clock when hopefully the rhinos behind me have woken up, and we will see. Obviously, the prospect is that in 16 to 18 months, that's how long it takes to gestate a rhino, there may be baby rhinos here at Whipsnade Zoo.
I'm very excited about seeing Sizzle and seeing the introduction, Justin. We look forward to it. Thanks very much.
Time now to get the news, travel and the weather where you are. Oh, look at this fella. Now, I'm saying that by way of a slight guess because I'm not sure if that is Sizzle, who has been introduced this morning, Whipsnade Zoo, introduced this morning to two potential mates.
So, yeah, Sizzle literally has a hot date. And the whole idea is we're going to see how they get along. We've got Justin Rowlatt down there who's going to explain it all. But is this the first time they've met, Sizzle and the two females?
Yeah, I believe it.
It
clearly
seems to be going well. Not that I'm an expert on first dates.
What's your indication of that?
Well, there's no fighting, there's no niggling. I mean, he's had a sniff, he's walked away, he's eating. He must feel comfortable in their company.
Well, a bit later on, we will find out from people who actually know what they're talking about in relation to rhinoceros behaviour. But yeah, there we go.
I don't think it's difficult to figure out if things are getting on. Find out what's happening wherever you are this morning. So, yeah, Sizzle literally has a hot date. And the whole idea is we're going to see how they get along. We've got Justin Rowlatt down there who's going to explain it all. But is this the first time they've met, Sizzle and the two females?
Yeah, I believe it.
It
clearly
seems to be going well. Not that I'm an expert on first dates.
What's your indication of that?
Well, there's no fighting, there's no niggling. I mean, he's had a sniff, he's walked away, he's eating. He must feel comfortable in their company.
Well, a bit later on, we will find out from people who actually know what they're talking about in relation to rhinoceros behaviour. But yeah, there we go.
I don't think it's difficult to figure out if things are getting on. Find out what's happening wherever you are this morning.
Right, I'm back with the latest from the BBC London newsroom in half an hour. There is, of course, plenty more on our website. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Naga, Munchetty and Charlie Stayt.
Good morning to you. 8:34 is the time. Let's talk to Nina. Nina, furlough scheme. Some people have been covered.
The Chancellor stood up at the Downing Street news conference and introduced it, and we were all thinking, what on earth? In March, businesses were forced to close their doors and temporarily lay off workers. The job retention or furlough scheme. Now, workers were essentially placed on leave, but then £3 billion. And the Chancellor did say, though, it can't last forever and for good. But 1 in 10 of the workforce is still on some form of furlough. Any government support at all, many of them have been left feeling really frustrated and abandoned. MPs think there could be at least 1 million workers in that boat, but one...
Nina, thanks very much.
Now, I was paying attention to what Nina was saying, but I was also keeping my eye on Justin Rowlatt. There's a lot of pointing going on down at Whipsnade Zoo because, Justin, you're with the rhinos this morning and Sizzle, particularly. Tell us the tale of Sizzle this morning. What's going on there?
Right, so we are behind me here. You can see the southern white rhinos, very rare animals here at Whipsnade Zoo. And they have just released the male rhino, Sizzle, who you can see with his back to us here. Sizzle's just been released. He's with the 4 females that are already here at Whipsnade Zoo. But he's actually meeting for the first time, or would be meeting for the first time, 2 new females, Jazeera and Fahari, who've been brought in as part of a breeding program. But when Sizzles came out, look what happened to Jazeera and Fahari. They immediately ran off, and there they are, right over there, if you can see them. So they're a bit nervous. Meanwhile, Sizzle seems to be kind of making his presence felt among the other female rhinos. So I'm joined by Malcolm Fitzpatrick, who's the head of conservation here at London Zoo and Whipsnade Zoo. Malcolm, what do we hope to happen here? I mean, be discreet about what we're talking about, but what are we hoping from Sizzle today?
Ultimately, we're hoping for breeding success, but as you can see, it's going to be a long courtship. We need to maintain genetically and demographically healthy zoo populations because more and more they're acting as an insurance population against species that are facing imminent extinction in the wild. And we've got countless success stories of zoo-bred animals that have been reintroduced to their former range states, so we know it works. However, these conservation breeding programs that zoos collaborate on are very expensive to operate, and we need to make sure that we can access government funding to continue our vital conservation work.
So the idea is that you share, zoos around the world share animals, they move them around, and that way you keep the genetic diversity you need. So Sizzle here, the idea is to bring these new females in, and if Sizzle was a little bit more enthusiastic, he'd be over there kind of greeting his new girlfriends and making them feel comfortable. So, I mean, how long would this process, got to be quite careful how I describe this, how long would the process normally take to introduce a new rhinos? How long would it take for Sizzle to kind of, you know, to become friendly with the new rhinos?
It can take a long time, but these conservation breeding programs, we've been working for a year to actually import Jazeera and Fahari, and Sizzle in time. It will be a long courtship, but we are hoping ultimately breeding success, and in 16 to 18 months we have more young rhino here at Whipsnade as part of this vital conservation program that really is so important for the future of white rhinos.
Well, it all seems a bit feisty here. There's a lot of kind of tension between the rhinos. So this is Sizzle and the existing females. Meanwhile, in the back, you could just see over the little rays, you can see the other 2, the 2 new females looking, I think, rather anxiously at the way Sizzle's behaving. He's quite a big animal, throwing his weight around, isn't he?
It's an exciting time. The rhino introductions are often boisterous with a lot of huffing and puffing that we can hear and a little bit of argy-bargy. But it's all going really well, and we are hoping for success.
So listen, the gestation, I've been learning about rhinos today, the gestation period of a rhino is between 16 and 18 months. So as Malcolm says, it'll take a while for Sizzle to get used to his new, females, the new girlfriends. But maybe in 16, 18 months, 2 years' time, we might have baby rhinos here at Whipsnade Zoo. So we'll certainly come back for that.
Justin, can I just, so we establish, I know you did it before, can we check whether the lady rhinos are any closer at this point? Can your camera show us the gap between? Are they coming closer?
The lady rhinos are on the other side of the hill. I think you may just be able to see their backs moving there. They are very anxious about Sizzle. As soon as Sizzle came out, they immediately ran off. So they're very anxious. In fact, Sizzle and the other female rhinos are sort of having a bit of a showdown over here. It's quite a tense day for the rhinos here at Whipsnade Zoo.
Well,
there we go.
You know, these things, you don't want to rush things, do you?
No. Who'd have thought a rhino could disappear that quickly? You know, big animal, isn't it? Carol, you got a thought on that for us this morning? What do you think?
I have no thoughts on that at all.
No, I'm sure you do. You must have something, Carol. You must have a thought on that. I know you do.
Every time I say something, Charlie and Naga, it ends me up in trouble. So I am moving on from that
It's the
one.
kind of trouble you like. That's one of your phrases.
Yes, it is. But anyway, what a beautiful start to the day it is in Nottinghamshire. Look at the
hospital. So regular testing of staff is absolutely essential. The government has conceded that it is necessary to do it in the hotspots where the prevalence is rising, but it's not happening there either. And that's why we urgently need to address this.
With the Prime Minister and the Chief Medical Officer, of course, but not a huge announcement in terms of any changes.
Yeah, morning to you, Naga. There weren't any big announcements, were there? And there was one or two people raising an eyebrow saying, well, what was the point? And the regulations around the UK and indeed around England.
I can't remember. I don't remember the detail.
I was with Johanna Conter. And
you were with Heather Watson?
Yeah, I had to try and return the Conter serve.
He had to return a bushel bullet as well, didn't he? Effective, but it was there.
I've never been able to serve overarm.
Well, I mean,
ever.
If you can perfect the technique of underarm, I mean, I'd serve overarm, but usually 50% go in, 50% go out, so it's not that effective.
Do you remember, Mike? You and I playing doubles with Joe Conter and Heather Watson.
Who won?
Cha-chang! Sorry,
well, I mean,
ever.
If you can perfect the technique of underarm, I mean, I'd serve overarm, but usually 50% go in, 50% go out, so it's not that effective.
Do you remember, Mike? You and I playing doubles with Joe Conter and Heather Watson.
Who won?
Cha-chang! Sorry, the name of it.
Come on, I mean, that's
not that I'm an expert on first dates.
What's your indication of that?
Well, there's no fighting, there's no niggling. I mean, he's had a sniff, he's walked away, he's eating. You must feel comfortable in their company.
Well, a bit later on, we will find out from people who actually know what they're talking about in relation to rhinoceros behaviour. But yeah, there we go.
I don't think it's difficult to figure out if things are getting on. Find out what's happening wherever you are this morning. OK, and we'll keep an eye on that. And Chris, you outlined where that will be available on the BBC News channel as well. Chris, thanks very much. Chris. At 6 o'clock, you can follow the usual BBC News outlets for the Health Secretary's statement to the Commons about those new restrictions. Bye-bye. Not that I'm an expert on first dates.
What's your indication of that?
Well, there's no fighting, there's no niggling. I mean, he's had a sniff, he's walked away, he's eating. You must feel comfortable in their company.
Well, a bit later on, we will find out from people who actually know what they're talking about in relation to rhinoceros behaviour. But yeah, there we go.
I don't think it's difficult to figure out if things are getting on. Find out what's happening wherever you are this morning. Bye-bye.